Hello, ELIC 30. This is Michael, and we are in How to Be Human, An Autistic Man's Guide to Life by Jory Fleming, beginning chapter 6. And we're continuing the theme of language issues. Chapter 5 was language barriers, and chapter 6 is language disconnect. So we're beginning on page 117. Language disconnect. Talking about all the ways that language and communication can be misunderstood. Along with learning the mechanics of speech, all of us have to learn how to speak. This how revolves around social cues, what is acceptable to say and what isn't, and how communication conveys not only words, but the mental and emotional state of the person speaking. Neurotypical people absorb this information from the time they are babies. Their neurons take repeated experiences and translate them into increasingly accurate predictions of someone else's emotions and state of mind via a largely unconscious process. This is how most of us can detect subtle changes in meaning and sort through nonverbal clues about emotions. By contrast, Jory is very aware of the step-by-step nature of this process for himself. Jory: I'm not as good at learning by experience, so it takes me more experiences to understand the same thing. At some point, I will have had enough experiences where I'm able to preset a filter or an additional mental loop to be aware. I want to be respectful of the way everybody else tends to think. Not that everybody else thinks the same way, but there are similarities. If the exact same thing has happened, I wouldn't need more than 1 or 2 times to learn. But if it involves something like an emotion, like somebody was offended or hurt by something said, that's a very nuanced thing. 2 situations where a similar reaction might arise can have very little in common except for the fact that there's a conversation occurring. For me to understand that circumstance, I would need quite a few actual examples. For some of the super nuanced ones, I'm not any better even after many examples. For example, language that is racist has much more similarity in terms of the words used, so I wouldn't need many instances to recognize when somebody said something racist towards someone else. But a more subtle event, such as when one person is being dismissive of another in a conversation, that's still something I don't pick up on very well. I've tried to train myself to be more observant, so I might miss the language bit, but notice the body posture reaction a bit. I might miss the language bit, but notice the body posture reaction bit. But I'll have no idea what exactly happened, which is pretty typical. I won't remember what the specific words were. I'll only know that they were impactful for someone else. What makes a conversation complicated is anything related to body posture. If somebody's indicating by nonverbal means that they feel a certain way, but they don't give you any indication, or they use language that says the opposite, that's very hard. I could ask someone, "Are you okay?" They may say yes, but their body posture is saying the opposite. It's terrible. Unless I'm observing that there's a disconnect between their language and the posture they're portraying with their limbs, I might just assume that they're telling the truth and make a horrible assumption. I might be super cheery and just totally steamroll over them and make their day much worse because I didn't catch those cues. Where everyone else would know to say, "Are you sure? I'm here for you if you want to talk." Okay, let's pause for a moment. What does he mean by to steamroll over them? Okay, this expression comes from a piece of construction equipment called a steamroller. And you sometimes see them in movies or perhaps in cartoons. It's a large, heavy machine with a cylinder on the front, and the purpose is to roll over something like loose dirt or perhaps newly poured asphalt, making a street, to push it down and make it very smooth. You can look it up and see pictures of steamrollers online. So it's used often to describe a situation where a person doesn't demonstrate consideration for the other person in the conversation, but just carries on as if the person weren't there, or as if the person had not said what they said. So that's what he's saying. Someone might say something and I won't notice their body language, so I'll ignore the body language and just continue on, ignoring that and paying attention only to the words that they said, and they weren't telling the way that they actually felt. So he's using the expression to steamroll over them to describe that. Continuing on. I've noticed that if I'm interacting with somebody one-on-one, where fewer signals are being sent, I have a better chance of picking up on them as compared to a group conversation where somebody's joke may have made someone laugh at the joke, but may have also made somebody else feel bad. Signals coming from 3 or more different people at the same time make it a lot harder. Even if I'm only the 4th person and I'm doing nothing, it makes it harder because my eyes can't be everywhere at once. In addition to nonverbal cues, Jory also struggles with the larger cultural contexts of language. He has a lot of questions, many of which also highlight some of the fundamental assumptions most neurotypical people make when we communicate. He wants to know, why don't people in the US and people in the United Kingdom speak the same if they are both speaking English? Why does anyone give more weight or value to what a celebrity says? Why do people adopt someone else's words as their own? These are assumptions worth questioning whether or not you have autism. Jory. I can learn the rules of the game, but the rules don't make sense to me. If you can make an assumption based on culture or the understood social contract, and then do things subconsciously, you speed up things. But from my perspective, I can't look up social contract on the internet and have some document tell me what it is. It's all assumed. It's all subconscious. And it's re-envisioned and re-edited all the time. There seem to be multiple versions of these contracts for different things, which combine to make it into a culture. But for me, it's just very strange. When I came from the US to the UK, it was confusing to me that there's a difference. In my mind, everybody is different from everybody else. And so why would specific locations do things one way, and then in another location, it's entirely different? Even across a very short distance, there can be a different social contract. I find that very hard to understand because in my mind, not only do you have the confusion of why would you even do that in the first place, but then there's an additional layer of confusion because there's no uniformity. It's as if when you use a computer, you never know which way to plug in the cord because the plug location has been switched, or it looks different, or it has a different shape. And so it takes you forever to figure out where to plug in your power cable. That's why industry standards are adopted. It makes it easy and makes it simple. But in terms of communication, for me, it seems as if everybody knows there's a standard, and I'm the only one who's saying, what standard are y'all talking about? There's no standard here. I wasn't invited to the deliberating conference that set out the standard. I'm just not part of this club. But I try to get by. I can still observe culture. But I tried to get by. I can still observe culture and still take notes on it and hope it doesn't change too much. This discussion of language differences then led us to speak about how our larger society treats words and ideas. Jory shared his views on the concept of what is an independent idea and asked why people are often so quick to give more weight to a celebrity's words than those of a non-famous person. Jory: what really stands out for me is that I don't understand the whole process of people hearing language and then they adopt it for themselves. Later, you ask them for their thoughts about something, and they'll just repeat someone else's thoughts that they already heard. Except now they think that these are their own thoughts. Why on earth would you think that just because someone else, especially a person you don't know, said something, it's true? I can almost tell whether a person has independently thought about an idea themselves in any capacity. If it's coming from somewhere else, it sounds different. People also respond to another person's ideas depending on how they are presented. I'm not able to do that. I recognize that if you're emotionally connected to this issue, you may respond to someone else who has very strong opinions, but in the same way, I would never assume that someone speaking without passion has no passion about the topic. I would treat both people identically, even though they speak differently, because both of them are strangers to me. Responding to language and to what is said are definitely areas where I diverge from a good number of people. They respond to strangers as if they knew them because of rhetoric, which seems to me kind of bonkers. I am confused as to why people follow celebrity figures and why their words become more powerful simply because who they are and the fact that they are famous. Why do people assume that being famous equates to having good character, more intelligence, or automatically being deserving of more respect? Because when you give more weight to what someone who is famous says, this also means that another person's words automatically carry less weight and have less power, even if they are the exact same words. So I find people's reactions a little bit odd because I'm like, why would you think that about this person that you don't know? And we'll stop there for this video.